It's great to be with you all virtually. I wish I could be with you in person, and really always love being able to participate in the NGEL conference every year. And great to see some familiar names on the list of attendees. Hi, Andy. Hi, Linda. Hi, Nick. Hope you all are doing well. So my name is Sarah Cullinane. I'm the director of Make the Road New Jersey. We're a grassroots immigrant and workers' rights organization. We're very fortunate to have Eric Jacobson as our star ESL teacher and founding volunteer that launched our ESL program when we started about coming up on 6 years now. So we are normally based in Elizabeth, Passaic, and Perth Amboy, New Jersey. And since COVID has started, have really pivoted our work to be virtual and digital, and are continuing sort of operating on all fronts and organizing work and providing legal services, hopefully soon online ESL classes and leadership development for youth. So today what I'm going to talk about, and here's a little, seems like here's a little info on our organization. We've been around since 2014. Our mission is to build the power of immigrant and working class communities to achieve dignity and respect and justice. And we engage immigrant communities in community organizing and know your rights presentations, civic participation, leadership development. And over the past 5.5 years, we've been able to win a variety of pro-immigrant policies through community organizing. The members of our organization who are working class, immigrant, Latinx families have come together to push and win driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, universal legal representation for immigrants who are detained and facing deportation, sanctuary laws, and laws that help prevent wage theft in the workplace. And so, today what I want to talk about is sort of the panorama of where we are in immigrant rights under COVID. So, immigrants have been incredibly hard hit by COVID, and this is an extraordinarily difficult time for immigrant communities, as it is everyone else. We know that, COVID has impacted communities across the state. New Jersey has been really the sort of new epicenter of the pandemic. But it's immigrant communities that are both working on the front lines and are also completely excluded from government relief when they're undocumented. And so what I want to share today is sort of some of what we've been seeing in our membership and in communities that we work with. And I'm sure it will resonate with how, what you all are seeing in your communities, and please, with students and others in your communities. So please, share out the experiences that you're seeing. So I want to give some data that we've been able to collect, and then really share out a sort of new platform for immigrant inclusion and within the COVID pandemic that also encompasses some of the other organizing and policy goals that we've created as an organization. Every year as an organization, Eric has been there for this process that members come together and vote on a platform of campaigns that they'll take on. And we created that platform back in January, and things have really shifted since then. So I think what we're seeing is just a lot of the issues that were sort of most impacting our members, whether it was access to housing and healthcare, whether it was fear of using public benefits that it may result in deportation, or whether it was about ending detention in our state and in our country. We're seeing all of those issues sort of become just all the more crucial to fight on, and really sort of figuring out ways to make our services work and to make our organizing work happen, whether it's working one by one with 1,000 members to download Zoom on their very old cell phones, or figuring out ways to do a coordinated banging of pots and pans at the same hour on May Day rather than gathering in the streets. So we've been sort of engaging in that pivot, and really eager to hear also what other people have been able to do in terms of holding classes and providing services. So here in New Jersey, immigrants have really experienced the brunt of COVID-19 in really intense ways. So first, and I'll be speaking, about immigrant populations in general, but I want to focus in particular on undocumented communities because they've been, one, sort of left out of the narrative, and two, left behind by almost all government relief at the federal and state level. So here in New Jersey, we have one of the largest shares of essential workers who are undocumented. So 220,000 essential workers in New Jersey are undocumented. They're working on the front lines in healthcare, in warehouse work, in logistics sector work, in deliveries, in the essential construction industries. And this is, I should say, this number is before, some of the reopening that happened yesterday in New Jersey. And so immigrant workers are really on the front lines, but undocumented workers are completely carved out of healthcare provisions, of health access, including Medicaid and other public benefits. So they're both sort of doing the frontline work. And what we've also found is that immigrants are also, there's 500,000 immigrants in New Jersey, about a little bit more than 300,000 that are working. 120,000 undocumented immigrants have worked in industries that are the most hard hit by COVID. So we're both seeing people that are on the front lines, essential work, continuing to work, often in very precarious and unsafe situations, or that they've completely lost their work. And when they do, they're ineligible for unemployment insurance, for the stimulus, and for many other types of relief. And we don't have any statistics on immigration status of individuals who've been impacted by COVID. I think that's something that we have to look into. I'm not sure how we'll get access to that, but what we have seen is that Latinx folks in New Jersey have made up an outsized portion of the positive tests, positive COVID cases. 30% of positive cases are from Latinx people, despite making up 19% of the population. So, that's not a proxy for immigration status, but it is one way. In addition, Black New Jerseyans are disproportionately impacted by COVID.
Sarah, can I say one quick thing before you move forward? So there was some questions about sharing the data, and I can pass along the report that Make the Road created, right?
Great, yes. And actually these two data points here, the 220,000 essential workers are undocumented, which is one of the highest shares of any, essential work population in the country or labor force in the country. That data comes from the Center for Migration Studies, so we can share that report. And then 120,000 undocumented workers, that status or that statistic comes from a study that Rutgers School of Labor Management and New Jersey Policy Perspective did for us last week.
Okay.
Or 2 weeks ago. So I'll add those links in as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks. So we did a report. We found that it was really hard to find any data, and we wanted to know and sort of capture the experience of the members and community members that we've been working with. So in a period of 4 days, we surveyed 226 immigrant families in New Jersey in in-depth phone interviews, and it had some pretty staggering results in terms of sort of the pain and suffering that people have been going through and access to benefits. So we titled the report Essential and Excluded because there are so many essential workers who have been excluded from relief. And this is what we found. First, we found deep inequities in access to healthcare. 75% of the families we surveyed and 85% of undocumented individuals report having no health insurance, despite the fact that about half the families that we surveyed had reported either being sick with COVID or COVID-like symptoms or having a family member that was sick. And even more frightening, the fear of immigration enforcement or the fear of using healthcare services meant that 64% of people said that they hadn't been visiting doctors regularly or local social services because they were worried about immigration enforcement or the impact on their status. So what we're seeing is both inability to access care because of lack of access to insurance, and then also fears of even using free or public clinics. And then, of course, immigrants have been excluded from most relief, and we saw deep and sort of intense income insecurity. The vast majority of survey respondents said they were worried about making rent in May. We did the survey in April. I think it was something upwards of 80%. And now I'm going to try to switch the slides. Okay. We also found that immigrants that we surveyed were unable to pay for basic necessities like food, medicine, and utilities. 91% of undocumented people that we surveyed were worried about being able to pay utilities or their bills. 83% worried about accessing enough food for their families, and 70% were worried about buying medicine for themselves or for their families. We also found pervasive labor rights violations. A majority of people that we surveyed said that they were not provided with paid sick days by their employers, and that's particularly troubling because the paid sick leave law in New Jersey, which permits 5 days or requires the employers provide 5 days of paid sick leave per year, and that's been expanded under the CARES Act, the federal law. That applies to everyone regardless of status, and so that means that there's really an issue with individuals being able to access even the benefits or the rights that they're, that they are able to, that they qualify for or that they have. And here's a quote, which I won't read, but you can, take a minute to take a look from a woman in Passaic who's a warehouse worker, who's, I think her story really encapsulates what we heard over and over again. That she both, was sick, had, been working through COVID. Her daughter got sick, and, she was unable to, this woman was unable to access protective equipment, and, was really stuck in this really tough decision whether she should stop working to protect her own health because she had, a heart condition, but that would mean that she would really lose access to all income. And so, yeah, so this, I'll give you guys a minute to take a look at this story. Okay. And now on to some of the relief. So the Congress has passed now, I think they're on their 5th stimulus bill. They passed 4 so far, and the CARES Act was the largest. And, it was intended to be a sort of omnibus legislation to support small business, unemployed individuals, local government, states, and, massive bailouts to some wealthy corporations along the way. And, for our purposes, we'll just focus on the provisions that impact immigrant families. So while the Federal CARES Act was supposed to be a sort of, large-scale relief for individuals impacted, it really largely left behind immigrant communities and many others and their families. So most immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, DACA recipients, green card holders who've been here for less than 5 years, were left behind in the expansion of Medicaid coverage to cover COVID treatment and testing. ITIN filers, so ITIN, as many of you are familiar with, is the tax ID number that you can file your taxes with if you are, if you don't have lawful status or a social security number here. Immigrants pay, New Jersey immigrants pay $1.1 billion every year in federal taxes through ITINs and $600 million in state and local taxes through a combination of tax filing and property tax and others. And so they've been completely carved out of the stimulus payments. So even if you've been paying your taxes for 20 years, like one of the survey respondents had said, you will not be eligible for the stimulus payment. And the kicker here is that it's not only that immigrants are left behind, undocumented immigrants rather, ITIN filers, it's also that if an immigrant spouse or children are on the same tax return, so if you file jointly with your spouse, even if your spouse is a US citizen, they can't obtain the stimulus payment. Even if your children are US citizen children, they can't obtain the $500 stimulus payment. So this is a really sort of cruel, concerted effort to not only punish immigrants, but also anyone that lives with them that's part of their family or their household. And in the CARES Act, immigrants are also left behind from pandemic unemployment insurance, which was the expansion of employment insurance, the extra $600 a week that goes to more than just traditional employees, but also to the self-employed and gig workers. So it's sort of a gloomy federal picture. And then at the
Sarah,
level,
Sarah, before you move forward, are there any questions that folks have about either the CARES Act or the findings of the Make the Road study? And again, you can either write your questions, or if you want, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Wait time is always awkward in virtual spaces, right? As people are like thinking, if you're in a classroom, you can see that people are thinking and kind of jotting their ideas down, but so in terms of the Make the Road study that was shared sort of I think with the public, and it was also shared with reps from the state.
That's right. Yes. And we've definitely been able to make some progress on some of the recommendations, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, we got a pretty good reaction.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So any other questions about the CARES Act? Nope. All right, great. I just wanted to make sure people have a chance to ask questions. So I think you can go forward. Yeah.
So at the state level, just to sort of clarify some of the other areas where immigrants have been excluded. So public health insurance, SNAP, which is food stamps, safety net assistance, both TANF and general assistance, immigrants who are undocumented or don't have lawful status, immigrants who are DACA recipients, and green card holders who've been here less than 5 years. Or have had their green card for less than 5 years, they're ineligible for those benefits at the state level. Undocumented immigrants are ineligible for unemployment insurance, and we're going to put out a report soon that shows that undocumented immigrants have actually paid $1 billion into the unemployment system over the past 10 years in New Jersey, but they're statutorily carved out from reaping any of those benefits when they become unemployed. There are a couple areas where the state has stepped up to provide assistance to undocumented immigrants and their families. And I should say that kids of undocumented immigrants, if they're U.S. citizens or been here with a green card for more than 5 years, are eligible for SNAP and safety net assistance. On healthcare, the COVID testing sites are open to everyone, regardless of status. The state has made sure that individuals will not be charged co-pays or any type of patient cost sharing, even if the patient has charity care. So that's been really important. I think there are still some barriers that we've found, including testing sites where you have to drive to get tested. And if you don't have access to a car, that can make it really impossible to get a test. And there are others that will require a prescription from a doctor before, and it can be hard to access a doctor or pay for $50 telehealth fee. So I think we've been working to sort of eliminate some of those barriers, but in the beginning that they were very difficult. And I should also say that there's been a special benefit for essential workers to provide them with a child care credit, and that's open to all essential workers, regardless of status. And that information is available on the New Jersey state COVID response page, and we can share that out.
Sarah, there was a question about Atlantic City casino employees. Are they eligible to receive assistance? Do you know if there's a special dispensation for them?
That's a great question. I mean, I think if they're undocumented, I don't know of any special program. And I should say there are a bunch of private programs cropping up. So there's the Pandemic Relief Fund, which is the First Lady of New Jersey's fund. It now has they've raised $20 million, and they're going to be giving out some gift cards to undocumented people or people who are carved out of federal aid. There's been a bunch of local efforts in Jersey City. There's a $3 million fund. Some of it will go to the undocumented. Newark just created a fund that opened yesterday that will provide $1,000 payments to individuals who live in Newark and they're not, immigration status isn't a requirement. The United Way also has some funds. So there are some private funds popping up, but I'm not sure of anything that's specific to Atlantic City, but I also may just not be aware of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll come back to some of the state responses that we've been pushing for, both at the state and federal level. But I wanted to also just turn to the situation of immigrants who've been detained. So I think probably many of you have seen the stories in the press since COVID started. New Jersey has actually accumulated more coronavirus cases of ICE detainees and workers at ICE detention centers than anywhere in the country. New Jersey is home to 4 immigration detention facilities. The Elizabeth Detention Center, which is a private facility that normally houses about 400 people, 300, 400 people. It's run by Core Civic, which is a private, for-profit immigration detention company. And then the Essex, Hudson, and Bergen County jails all have beds that are that they contract with ICE to detain immigrants who are facing deportation. And there have been pretty severe COVID outbreaks in each of these facilities. Detainees have gone on hunger strike. Several guards in these facilities have died, although detainees have not, we haven't heard of any reports of detainees dying in New Jersey. And there have been a series of lawsuits and a lot of public pressure, petitions, protests with, caravan protests, hunger strikes led by inmates, detainees. And ICE has released now about 900 immigrants nationwide since March, though there are still 28,000 individuals detained. And we've heard of about 40 or 50 people being released, maybe up to 80 now in Essex. They have a sort of concerted program where they're reviewing cases. And there have also been several lawsuits filed, including last Friday, a lawsuit filed by attorneys from the American Friends Service Committee, from the NYU Law, Immigrant Rights Clinic, and from the Immigration Detention, I got that wrong, IDP project. And they are seeking, it's a class action on behalf of all detainees in the Elizabeth Detention Center seeking their release. And I think that there was a guard that died at the Elizabeth Detention Center, I think over the weekend. So this is another area where there, is really intense health risks for detainees. The public health and sort of detainee health care has been an issue way before the pandemic broke. There have been, outbreaks of different, I think measles at one detention center and other, just over the years, it's been a serious issue. And I think the pandemic has just sort of exacerbated a lot of what has already, the poor treatment and healthcare systems that have already existed before. So I wanted to shift over to a conversation about what some of our demands, what our organization and what others are seeking in terms of access to benefits and really, health for immigrant communities. So the first is that Congress include immigrants and ITIN filers in federal relief. And we had some great progress on Friday night when the House passed the HEROES Act, which is stimulus round 5, I think that's where we are right now. It includes undocumented immigrants in healthcare, in emergency Medicaid, that would cover treatment and testing for COVID patients. It also would include ITIN filers and their families in the stimulus payments. So this is really important and would be a really big step forward. That bill also has relief for cities and states. It also provides for automatic extension of DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, for individuals who have DACA. They'd be able to extend their status during the pandemic. It also provides for a pathway to temporary protected status for essential workers who are undocumented. And this has only passed out of the House. We see that there will be a very, very steep uphill battle in the Senate, but I think it is an important move, and hopefully maybe we can get some of these multiple important programs. I should note that the program does not provide unemployment insurance to undocumented people, and unemployment insurance is by far the largest benefit for people who are out of work. So that's still lacking. And so in terms of an action step here, we have we're driving calls to our senators, Menendez and Booker, who have been very supportive of this issue, but to ensure that they stay strong on immigrant inclusion in this next round of the stimulus. So that's sort of on the federal level. The next is on the state level. So after we put out our report, we've been in conversations with our state legislature to create a fund, disaster relief fund for undocumented people or people who've been excluded from federal relief. And last week, Senators Ruiz and Scuteri announced a $35 million fund, a bill that would establish a $35 million fund, which is, falls far short of what we think would be adequate in terms of, reaching every single person that's been excluded. But it would provide $1,000 for many but not all ITIN filers through a sort of tax rebate system at the state level. And that bill is currently pending in the state legislature. And a big problem and sort of roadblock in getting anything passed is that our state's financial situation is pretty bleak at the moment. There's no revenue coming in. New Jersey's had no rainy day fund for a very long time. And so, these federal funds coming through are really important for New Jersey to be able to provide any extended benefits. The other piece that we're fighting for is on stronger workplace protection. So within our membership, we've actually lost 2 members who are part of our Passaic organizing group, and they worked in warehouses and factories where they didn't have access to adequate protective gear. So, based on their experiences, we've been pushing a campaign led by workers to call for better worker safety protections. And that campaign is calling for a hotline where workers could call and the state would have to respond immediately if there were reports that there wasn't enough protective equipment, or that the employer wasn't following the social distancing guidelines put out by the state. We're also fighting for the right to refuse unsafe work. We had a member about a month ago who refused to go to work, or rather she got sick with COVID at work. She left, and when she lodged a complaint about the working conditions, because there'd been a large outbreak of coronavirus at the factory where she worked, she was fired by her employer. So we're seeing retaliation against workers, in particular immigrant workers, when they speak out about conditions, and that's in factories in Totowa, New Jersey, but also in the largest corporations in the country like Amazon, where workers have been fired in retaliation for leading strikes to protect worker safety. The state can also use its executive power in an emergency. There are very broad executive powers to release detainees. They've exercised that power on the criminal side by releasing many individuals who've been incarcerated, if they meet certain threshold of whatever crime they've been convicted of. And we're urging the state to also use that power to release detainees from ICE. The next one is, the next sort of plank of the platform is a campaign we've been working on for a long time, and I think has sort of met its moment in terms of COVID being sort of a moment to push. So immigrants in New Jersey are unable to access professional licenses or occupational licenses. There are more than 200 professions that require a license. And if you lose your status, or if you don't have a lawful status, you can't access a license, even though if you had one, you may be able to work as an electrician, as a an accountant, as a nurse, in all the healthcare fields that are so important right now, and where there's such a labor shortage. And so we actually have legislation that we've been working on for years, and it's a campaign led by our youth group, our Dreamer group, and they got a bill introduced just last week that would remove citizenship requirements for professional licenses. And we'd love to hear from you if any of your students are professionals in their country or are seeking to get a professional license here, and they have faced any barriers because of their status. This is a real moment to push, and we're hoping to recruit others to join this campaign, and would love to hear from you if you have any students who may qualify. The final point is rent relief. So this is, I think, the sort of so the governor put a moratorium on evictions during the pandemic, and after, during the public health emergency, and up to 2 months after it ends. But what happens, when the moratorium is lifted, we're going to see families who've been out of work, ineligible for any type of relief, now owing 5-6 months of rent. And the impact could be devastating. So there's a campaign to cancel rent, which is an idea that the state could step up and say, basically, rent payments should be forgiven. And that's sort of been one of the bolder demands. There's also rent relief funds being set up, but many of them would exclude undocumented people. And so making sure that any rent relief fund also includes immigrants without status and all families is also a critical platform of this platform. So I'll stop there if there are any questions. I know that was a lot of different items, and they're all sort of in different stages right now, but I'd love to hear any questions if you have any. Also, if you're hearing stories from your students, from community members, families, of people that could be impacted by any of these, it'd be great to hear.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So 2 things have already started to bubble up. So one is about the professional licenses campaign. When I send out the follow-up email, I can add a link to the Make the Road New Jersey website that has information about that. Should I also, for people that are particularly interested, should I have them contact the youth group directly, or is there another kind of clearinghouse about the professional license campaign?
Yeah, so for the professional license campaign, we maybe we can share the email address. Is there a chat that I can put it in?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You could do it as a question, and I could repost it to everybody, and then I can also put it in the email.
Okay, great. I don't know that I have the question piece, but here.
Okay, if not, I can send it to everybody in the follow-up email.
Okay.
That might be easier.
No, I think I just sent it to, wait, I think I can send it to everyone.
Okay.
No, I can't. Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll add that to the follow-up email.
Okay, great. Yeah, and please share any stories that you have, or anyone that is interested in getting involved. Please share the contact.
Right. And so then Nick has a question about that, which does that legislation drop citizenship as a requirement for professional licenses? Would it permit undocumented New Jersey residents to acquire these licenses?
Yes, it would permit undocumented individuals to obtain a license, which is huge. I mean, the last version of the bill we had was just for DACA recipients and TPS holders. This would really, it would remove all citizenship and immigration status requirements. I should say it doesn't mean then that anyone that gets a professional license will be able to get a job. Employment authorization is still required for many of these professions, but some people can get a professional license and then start their own business or work as a consultant where you wouldn't need work authorization.
Right.
So it's a very important sort of way for people to continue to, pursue and livelihood here.
Right. And Nick, I know Nick has done a lot of work in the area of immigrant entrepreneurship, right? And so that is a place where immigrant entrepreneurs, I think, could use that license to start their
Absolutely.
Start their thing. There was a question about the workplace protections. What have you heard from the New Jersey Department of Labor or the Department of Labor in DC in terms of trying to support workers in these situations?
So the Department of Labor here has less jurisdiction over workplace safety. We've mainly been working with OSHA, the federal agency that's been investigating, but their response rate is pretty slow, and we haven't been as pleased with some of their investigations. The county prosecutors are also enforcing any violations of the executive orders. They've also, when we've had cases of workers who are being forced to work. For example, someone at a cookie factory had to work like 1 foot apart, 50 people on the assembly line. There was a COVID outbreak, everyone got sick, someone died, it was horrible. So the county prosecutor actually got involved in that situation. The Department of Labor has done a lot of work with farm workers and created a new protocol for keeping farm workers safe. That's a whole other issue that's been really horrific, where there's been just massive outbreaks among farm workers, many of whom live in in like together, and the farm season's about to start, so they've been very active on that. And then the other piece is, undocumented immigrants are eligible for paid sick leave and some family leave insurance, and so the Department of Labor has been processing and following up on any complaints where people haven't been eligible for that or haven't been able to access that.
So would your suggestion be that if somebody's in that situation, to go through an organization rather than going individually?
I mean, feel free to reach out to us. I think the best steps are to call OSHA, and you can file a complaint on their website or call them. And then there's you can make a complaint on the state website of a violation of the executive order. There's an executive order for all the businesses that are open now, and it's about social distancing at the workplace. And you can also file with the Department of Labor, though their jurisdiction is more limited over workplace safety.
Okay. And then there was a question about unemployment insurance. Do you have any recommendations for free legal consultation agencies that deal with unemployment insurance?
Yeah, so the Legal Services of New Jersey has a practice where they represent people and provide advice on unemployment insurance. I'm sure they're receiving an overwhelming number of cases right now, but they have a 1-800 number that you can call and get advice from, and I can share that out in the notes as well.
Okay, great. Other questions that folks have about the kind of 6 demands? Not one less, right? 6 demands, not one less. Okay, there's a question here. So there's a question about, it says, we have many barriers like immigrants legally, language, health, culture, payments. What can I do if I want to help others with translations from English to Spanish? So what are places that people could maybe volunteer in?
Yeah, I mean, we would love your help. We have a new Spanish language website where we're putting up all the Know Your Rights materials in Spanish. We would love help translating materials. That's always helpful. And then also there's other organizations that are helping people file for unemployment, and they may need Spanish language interpretation or access other benefits. Yeah, please reach out. We'd love to connect you.
Is there a volunteer form for Make the Road on the website? I think there is, right?
Yes, on the website you can sign up to volunteer.
Okay. Yeah, so when I send out the email, I'll also make sure that I send out the link directly to that. Great, that's really good news that people want to do that.
Thank you, yeah.
Are there any other questions? Any other word on the detainees? Like, where do you see this going?
So as soon as the as soon as this lawsuit was filed on Friday, today, one of the named plaintiffs in the class action was put on a plane or removed, and I think is on a plane being deported right now. So there's already been like retaliation against this. I think there's opportunity for a really bold move, either by our governor to announce that he will release all detainees for public health reasons under his emergency executive authority, which is incredibly broad. ICE can also decide to release more people. The county jails that detain people can also decide to cut their contracts with ICE or release individuals pursuant to their contracts. There's really sort of much more open authority to take drastic measures because we're in a public health crisis. I think that it's important to keep the pressure on to ensure that those that do have the authority to take these steps and keep people safe will do so. I think, barring a sort of broad order to release everyone, there's the lawsuits will continue chipping away and helping to release detainees one by one.
I'm trying to remember who I get. Do I get information about this campaign through the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, or?
Probably, yes. They've been doing a bunch of great work. There was a 24-hour vigil by healthcare workers in front of the Elizabeth Detention Center over the weekend. There's been it's been a beehive of activity.
Yeah, so I'll add that to the email too, as much as possible. Great. to see which direct links people can click on to kind of get connected to the organizations and the networks that are doing this work. One of the concerns that I know that a lot of people have with the releasing detainees is it has to really be kind of it's a complicated process, right? Because if you're releasing somebody, you still need to make sure that they're getting tested, and so that the communities that they're getting released to know what's happening, right? It can't be just kind of a willy-nilly open the doors. It has to be done in a sort of with a mind towards epidemiology.
Absolutely, and I think there are systems in place and organizations that are ready to stand up and have been placing people, like First Friends has been helping people find housing, get tested. The detention centers themselves are now providing some testing.
Okay.
But I think it's all better than being in these tinder boxes of where people can get infected and don't have access to adequate care. But yes, sure. That's a great point.
Right. We just need to ask for all of it. Right. There was a question that can immigrants with job permits apply to SNAP and TANF?
So SNAP and TANF are much more restrictive than unemployment insurance. So for unemployment, all you have to do is have valid work authorization and you're eligible. SNAP and TANF are governed by PRORA, the federal law from 1996, that really limits the ability of people to apply for those benefits unless they're in a qualified immigrant category or have had a green card for more than 5 years. Some states have chosen to use state dollars to fill in and provide those benefits to DACA recipients or green card holders from their first day that they get a green card, but New Jersey has not done that.
Okay.
Their kids can, though, if they're U.S. citizens.
Okay.
I had a couple more slides on DACA that I just wanted to share quickly, but we can take, if there's more questions on this.
Nope, that sounds good.
Okay.
If they roll in later, we can address them later, yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
So another crisis. So as we're addressing the COVID crisis, the U.S. Supreme Court is getting ready to rule on a case that will determine the future of DACA. DACA, for those of you who don't know, is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's a program that provides relief from deportation, social security number, and work authorization to anyone who came to this country before they turned 16, who's gone to school here and graduated or pursued college education, and can pass a background check. And so, as you all know, the Trump administration ended DACA in 2017. There's about 800,000 people across the country who have DACA or had DACA, and courts there was an injunction against this decision to end it. Basically, people have been able to renew their DACA, but no one else has been able to apply. And sometime before, so there were a bunch of injunctions, back and forth lawsuits, different states suing back and forth. It ended up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard oral argument on the case in November and will issue a decision by the end of the term, and the term ends at the end of June. So every Monday, we're on our toes waiting for this decision to come out. We don't anticipate that it will be a positive decision. And so, I think this is just another thing to be aware of, that right now in New Jersey, there's only about 16,000 people that have DACA. It's a large number, but it's much reduced from the initial, there's 53,000 people who would have been eligible if the program stayed open. But it will be a pretty dramatic and horrific thing that happens. We have a rapid response plan that I'll also share with you all on the notes. I'm going to invite you all to join. We're going to be hosting a press conference, and every night we'll have a vigil the night that a virtual vigil, I should say, the night that the decision comes out, and we'll have like private Zoom spaces for DACA recipients to be able to process the decision and receive support. And then we're also, the Dreamers who are pictured here in this and behind this banner have launched a platform called New Jersey is Our Home, and it's steps that the state can take to protect Dreamers if DACA is rescinded. These are many young people who've lived here since they were 2, 3 years old, really know no other country, and have put down roots, have gone to school, are now working. And so we want folks to be aware that the decision could come out basically any Monday. Next Tuesday, I guess, is the next decision date. And even though it's not a moment where people can come together in person, we'll be hosting different virtual actions and workshops and provide legal services and support to people who are losing their status if that happens. So this is just some more resources. Our Spanish language COVID page, which is getting updated every day, and we'll have more and more information. We created a mutual aid and recovery fund. So Eric has participated in our mutual aid project. We're delivering food and groceries to our members who are sick and can't leave the house in a socially, delivering them in a safe way. We also have a fund set up. We're going to be giving out gift cards to people who lost their jobs and aren't eligible for relief through our organization. At this point, it's not a big public fund, but because we have so many clients and students and members of our own organization that will qualify, but if we get additional funding, we'll open it up to the public. There's campaigns for Recovery for All, and if you follow the I Am Essential or Recovery for All hashtags, you can get action alerts there. We also have our petition to urge New Jersey to release ICE detainees, and also another petition or a phone to action where you can click to send a message to your legislator to urge them to support universal representation, which is at risk of being cut right now, and it's a program that provides free legal representation to detainees. So again, we'll make this available to you all, but these are some of the resources we have, and this is how you can follow our work. And don't come to our office now, but send us an email or follow us on social media. Yeah, thank you.
In terms of the DACA response stuff, so is there a mailing list for the DACA information, or?
If you go to our website and sign up to the general mailing list, we'll send you updates, and you can get the DACA notices.
Okay. There's a question from Nick, whether you have any sense that this economic crisis is causing people to return home if they can, or if people are kind of waiting it out before going home.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We had heard some cases of people thinking about leaving. I think it's pretty hard to return home right now. So I think a lot of people are waiting it out. I don't know what will happen afterwards. I'm not sure the situation's any safer in people's home country. I'm sure it isn't. But I think the people that we're working with mainly are trying to make it work here and figure out how to how to survive.
Right. In what has become a third world country. So there's a question from Rosa about if undocumented people with citizen children who have SNAP are hurting their future residency application. Right. This is an issue of the public charge.
Yes, public charge. So not your kids. U.S. citizen children's use of SNAP will not impact your residency application. Really, in New Jersey, there are so few benefits that non-green card holders are eligible for that, public charge isn't as big of a concern. Like sort of legally speaking, I think what the larger concern in New Jersey is the sort of the chilling effect that it's had on people using services. People worry that it might impact them. They don't necessarily know if it will or won't, and then they stop using WIC or SNAP. But just to be clear, U.S. citizen children's use of benefits does not impact a parent's ability to adjust status to get a green card.
Okay. Sarah, do you want to make a pitch for the other webinar that's coming up? And I'll send a link to that in the email as well. The other immigration webinar you're doing?
Yes, I'm not going to remember the time, so Nick, you're going to have to correct it, but please join on May 29th. We'll be giving another update on immigrant sort of policy and immigrant rights under COVID in New Jersey, joined by the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice and by representatives from Human Services Department in New Jersey, and I think some others, and it'll be a great conversation, so I hope you can join.
Nick, I just unmuted you. Do you want to add anything to that pitch?
No, I think Sarah did a great job. We'll also have Joanna Kelly, who's the new policy advisor on New American Integration, and the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Human Services, Alyssa Nera. So it should be a great conversation.
All right, great. Yeah, so we'll, in the email, the follow-up email for this, there'll be a link for that. All right, thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
This follow-up email is going to become a short novel. So there's a question: is there an equivalent New York branch of Make the Road that we can share our students in New York?
Absolutely, they've been around for 22 years, and they've got 7 offices in Westchester, Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. And yeah, you can reach out, maketheroadny.org.
And there's also Make the Road in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts from folks? So I think very important information, some hopeful signs, some reasons to roll up our sleeves and keep fighting. So other thoughts?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you all so much.